he's like, he can't communicate with me. He's like, and then all of a sudden he's gonna call me and then have an issue, and it's like, dude, why don't you call me more consistently or tell me more consistently so that you don't have to call me once every fucking 5 months or once every 5 weeks and like have a major issue.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. All right, we're live. Appreciate you, man.
No problem.
Appreciate you. With your patience. What's your sister's name again? Hold on, she was in my grade. Fuck, I remember her name. Can't remember it right now, but she's married now, ain't she?
Yeah. Pregnant.
Nice. All right, we are going to be going live any minute here. What do we want to call this, CJ? Shooting from the hip. But we'll just call it.
It's important what we call it.
Yeah, I'm going to call it.
Something about sports.
Yeah, let's call it sports and.
Sports complexities.
Sports success and systems. Let's call it sports success and systems. This is for the first one. Sports success, since that's kind of a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about. And then I'll say with CJ Doherty.
So I'll give the backstory and then I'll just lead right into it. Keep talking about.
Yeah, I'll help guide it, so you don't have to worry. I'll do most of the guiding, and then I also am good at ranting. So if I'm ranting and you want to prep and see what you want to talk about, you can do that.
I'll take notes.
And just remember, it's all not about being perfect. It's about inexactness. And if people fucking want to judge us, that's on them.
Right.
We're just being authentic and vulnerable. Like what was it called? Consumer. It was the personal ethics standard. Being honest and being fucking
Honest,
authentic and truthful.
Just.
Yep. That's big
Free.
stuff. So we're going live, and I gotta turn on the mics. Make sure the mics are hot. Hot mics, hot mics. Make sure your mic's good, brother. You just gotta make sure, so when you talk into it, you have to make sure it's green. So make sure when you talk. So like if you're sitting there and you're talking on the show, we're not gonna be able to put it out for the audio on the podcast unless it picks it up your voice. So the tricky
Check one, check
yeah.
two.
So the hard part is me, and I have a loud voice, so mine's lower. And other people, when they talk soft, I have to turn theirs up, and then their mic picks me up. But yeah, so just pay attention when you're talking, stepping into the mic. But we should be good to go on the micage, and then I'll go live on Facebook and we'll lean into it. Super solid. I'm super stoked. Got lightning. 3, 2, and 1, as Joe Rogan would say, and we are LIVE, folks. LIVE at the Weirman Media Studios again with the homie. So folks, a big part of what I do at Weirman Media is about being authentic and vulnerable and telling stories and like remaining true to our realities and our being authentic and vulnerable in them. And I'm super excited because I got a really cool guy in the studio this morning. It's CJ Doherty. I actually grew up with him. We have connections back to high school, and we have a lot of authentic, vulnerable, like true connections that are just human based, and like I think a lot of our experiences come from our childhood, and a lot of our value in our experiences is based in what we start with in life and where we come from and the people we surround ourselves with when we come from that. And I think it's really interesting and cool, and I have a lot of people that I would honestly love to have on the show that I've gotten older. I'm 29. When I look back on it, like guys like Derek Loisel, I know you're friends with him. There's a lot of kids that I grew up with and guys now that are grown men that were also very interesting and have great stories and are really profoundly brilliant. And like really, Derek Loisel was a great hockey player. There's a lot of athletes involved with you as well. And I just think there's a lot of value to be brought forward. And I think it's really cool that you're willing to come on the show. CJ, you drove all the way up from Coon Rapids. Shout out to Coon Rapids. So I'm going to let you do a little bit of an intro. That's what we do here at Women Media. When we have first someone on the show, we give them 2 to 5 minutes just to touch on some keynotes about themselves so they can introduce themselves to the audience. And then whatever you're comfortable making the key points and just giving everyone a shout out and giving them insight into who CJ is and also just connecting the dots a little bit. And then we'll lean into some of these other key topics that you want to talk about with sports. I think it's really fucking rad that you want to do some of this stuff and I look forward to it. So give us a little bit of just a little bit of a short brief background on who CJ is.
Well, I grew up with you and your brother Isaac.
Yeah!
Isaac was in my grade. Josh was like a little brother to us.
2 years younger.
You
guys were like big brothers.
Hockey and baseball my whole life. I actually played a season with Isaac and Josh when we were younger. I currently play amateur baseball for a team out of Champlin. I don't play that much, but it's still good to get together with the boys and drink some beers in the parking lot. I lived in San Francisco for 2+ years. Graduated from St. Cloud State. Coached youth hockey when I was at St. Cloud State and coached a freshman baseball team when I was at my old high school in California where I graduated from. So I guess gotta go backwards. My senior year of high school, I moved out to San Francisco and came back my freshman year of college to St. Cloud.
I remember that.
And then went back to San Francisco to play a year of junior college baseball. And then I came back and finished out my college career at St. Cloud.
Graduating with a degree, right?
Yes, sir.
In what?
Communications.
Nice, man.
Currently I'm working on a used hockey skate business.
Super cool.
I used to work in a skate shop where I learned a lot, and I'm hoping to start a sports podcast with Josh pretty soon here. First thing we'll talk about today is how communication and unity are essential in sports.
Yeah, and I'll lean into that quick for you, and I just want to touch on, like you mentioned that you grew up and you traveled some, and I think that's really cool, and that you also played sports. We grew up in the same neighborhood, we played sports together, and it seems like a lot for you of your discipline and your understanding about the things that we talk about on Two Brothers TV comes back to your sports background, and I think you have a lot of value to bring forward on that as far as like creativity, discipline, structure, guidance, teamwork, communication. Like you obviously had a dad that was a little bit ahead of some other people's dads. Your dad was a coach for us growing up. Your dad had some understanding of a lot of these things, and he helped share that with kids on the sports team. And I think that's really cool. Shout out to your pops, because ultimately it's about giving guidance and direction to people, and I think sports is one of the best ways to do that. So for you, I think that's really cool, and I'm excited for that, because I think, wouldn't you say sports and a lot of your guidance and direction and the thing you just talked about come from just that, sports?
Yeah. I mean, I've learned more in sports than I've learned in, hard lessons in life in sports, getting your butt kicked and learning from that, and always coming back, never backing down.
I would agree.
I've played baseball, and that's a game of failures. You hit 3 out of 10 baseball, get 3 out of 10 hits, and you're succeeding. And
dude, that's a great fucking point, CJ. That's so cool. Like, this is what I love about this, the value that we can bring forward and continue to lean into. There's so many things we can talk about, but in baseball, he just gave a great example. 7 out of 10 you miss. That's a success for people. That's such a great, profound point there. We could do a whole episode on that, and the fact that you miss the majority, but you're still a success.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. But yeah, keep leaning into that.
We'll talk about some Astros numbers this year after there's less cheating. But going back to how communication and unity are essential in sports.
Yep.
The importance of communication in sports cannot be underestimated. It is said to be the key to success in both the sports and business world. Just the other day, Josh said on a podcast, with communication, we develop unity, cooperation, and flexibility. And that's just great right there, because it leads into the point of, if you have unity as a team, you'll have positive mental health. If you don't have unity, it can really damper everything that's going on. And
I just want to lean into that, CJ, because I think I think you bring a ton of value with what you just said, and that's such a key point about what I talk about, is the concept of communication, unity, and cooperation and flexibility. And what you just talked about is everything that we believe in. Like, if your team isn't rested and they're not content and they're irritable, to me, that's what I equate to what you just said with mental health, is being rested, content, and non-irritable. And keep leaning into that.
And then if you have clear communication and unity, there's a chance of coming together and changing the nature. We saw that big time with sports this year, playoffs, with whether it's LeBron having to come out and talk about Black Lives Matter, trying to change the nature. It also goes back to Isaac talking about a love of learning. I feel like you have to really start learning things or go outside of your comforts to actually see a different perspective. And a lot of us don't, or we're too, a lot of people don't care. And that's also a problem. But when I worked in the hockey shop,
Where was that?
It was in Blaine, Minnesota. A background of that, I had a boss who he has a really interesting family. He has 4 boys. 2 are in the NHL, one's on St. Cloud, and one's on the Gophers. So he has 4 boys, either in the NHL or D1s.
Yeah, that's
colleges right now.
That's the state of Minnesota for you.
Yeah, so it was very entertaining working there for him, with all the characters that came in. And but anyways, when I was working there, I'd always read the weekly Let's Play Hockey magazine.
Solid.
And one week there was an article that compared Einstein with Wayne Gretzky, and it talked about developing ways to strengthen communication throughout your team rather than just hoping your players talk to each other. And it's all about putting the idea in teammates' minds, like visualization or having a shared vision. When my younger cousin would go
Shared
play
vision,
in
big stuff there, brother.
when he'd go play in select tournaments where he knows nobody, I would tell him, if you know who your line mates are, start talking right away. You're on the bench, you're
chatter. There's nothing.
Sitting there and being unproductive. Start talking about some plays, and
I think that's a great point, man. You think about sports and it's all the chatter. You think about baseball.
Adapt,
Totally.
And then another part of the Gretzky-Einstein article says, unlike college and pro football, offensive creativity in hockey comes from players, and each year it is increasingly coached out of the game. Avoiding mistakes has become the highest priority, even at the youth level, where the need to win eliminates creative trial and error.
So I'm going to lean into that, and I think a lot about what you're talking about is really essential. I'm going to connect the dots on what we talk about a lot, but when you say Gretzky and Einstein, and you say chatter and communication with sports, and you talk about that, to me, I think a lot about being insurgent versus rigid and bureaucratic. So the founder's mentality, I lean into these key principles because that's what this show's all about. It comes back to the founder's mentality of being insurgent versus rigid and bureaucratic. If you think about things that are unwilling to change, mold, or adapt, or optimize, or grow, they become extinct. So like with sports, it's the same thing. I want to be in business or life or in sports, I want to be doing something new, unexpected, and be unpredictable all the time. And that requires me to be creative and think outside the box, like you said. Thinking and communicating that and sharing that vision about what are we going to do that is new and unexpected and unpredictable, especially in sports, because how are you going to go down the field different than you did last time? How are you going to get that puck in the back of the net? How are we going to put the ball in the hoop a way that no one's ever done it before? And I think that you're bringing a lot of value for it on that, CJ, and I think that's a great perspective to have, as well as leaning into your background on communication in college at St. Cloud State, and leaning into your background with communication in sports, because obviously I'm sure your dad helped with this somewhat when you were younger, but you seem like you have a really good, solid perspective of communication and the value of it. And I think there's a underestimated and undervalued, like communication just is so undervalued. And I just think there's a lot of us that are not putting enough of an emphasis on it. So let's go ahead and lean more into that Gretzky-Einstein concept. I love Einstein, and I think the idea of being creative and insurgent-like and doing things unpredictably and new and different and versus being rigid and bureaucratic is a big topic, and then leaning into communication as well.
Yeah, and a lot of it is coaching. I mean, we'll get into that later, but you can only learn as much as your coach is willing to teach you, and also in this case, what he's willing to let you do, what he's not going to yell at you about, and whatnot. But I found a study. It says in a study of high-level teenage athletes who suffered from burnout,
Yeah.
it found it was not physical exhaustion, which most contributed to the burnout. Poor communication was found to be the leading cause.
Man, that is sick. I remember when you sent me that and I read it, I was like, wow, that is fucking rad. That makes so much sense because it's also a statistic I read one time. I'm not exact CJ, I'm not exact audience, but if you Google it, I was reading a lot of things when I Google it, I learned by Googling. And one of the number one reasons people leave a business or employees leave a business, when they leave, they say it's attributed to the leader and it's attributed to the lack of communication from the top. So I think that's like, it was like 80% or more of the people that leave a business or they get fired or they quit or there's an a termination of their employment, they attribute it to lack of communication or lack of leadership or lack of communication from the top of the business.
And I also read something about how a lot of CEOs or people that start businesses try and leave after 3 or put the duties on. They try and find a new CEO, and that's the downfall of everything you just talked about. That they leave because of the leader. You know, when you lose your boss, you might not want to work for the next one, or you know.
Exactly, and I think I want to lean into that as well, and we can keep going with what your points are, but I think you said it with coach and mentor. For me, a big part of my life is taking direction from, I've always taken direction from someone that's ahead of me. Whether it was Kim Duffett, the sculptor, shout out Kim, KD Sculpts in Hawaii, shout out to Tom Wallace at Edge Home Finance, shout out to Ben Weirman at A Better Craftsman, shout out to Gary Vaynerchuk at VaynerMedia. I think you're 100% right with all these points, and I think there's so much value in all these things that we could lean into all of them. But coach and mentor for me is someone I take direction from that is somewhat of a compass for me, that gives me guidance, that help me find my purpose, find a direction and a strategy to get where I want to go. And I think that's exactly what you talked about.
So moving on to the next topic, which will be, with all the personalities and egos in sports, it makes it complex, and complexities kill growth.
Mm-hmm.
And after looking into that, I thought, you know, how about we kill complexities before they kill growth? Meaning ego and personalities.
The coffee. Yeah, kill complexities before, what was that?
Before they kill your growth. And then I wrote, it's the coach's job to kill these distractions, meaning the parents most of the time. It can be a player that's a distraction, but a lot of them is coming from the parents.
Oh man.
And then, so it's the coach's job to kill these distractions and the bad habits coming from the kids. Or it could also be a parent with a bad habit, teaching their kids something that doesn't agree with.
God damn, CJ, you just brought it full into a big topic here, and this is why I love the show, because it forces dialogue, CJ, and I'm always like thinking about things then. And when we have conversations and you bring a perspective that I didn't think about. So like with sports, I didn't think about this, but like you just said it. And when I read Ego is the Enemy, the book, CJ, it said the ego is the enemy, and the goal is to stunt the growth of ego at a young age, it said.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, I'm connecting the dots, it makes sense, because they teach, it all comes from who teaches us how we behave. And it's most of the time, it's our parents. That's such a profound point, because if you think about it, then in sports, the behaviors and the ego that is present, that is the complexity, because like you just said, sports is the highest level of that. There's no more, if you look at the highest performing athletes, there's no more ego, testosterone, and like big dick measuring than sports. So it makes sense why it's so complex. And I think it's interesting your perspective with parents at a younger age being, man, that is really profound, because I think we could do a whole episode on that as well, because I didn't think about that, but parents are a big part of the problem, especially with sports, because they're the ones that give the kid the problem, essentially, and they're not the ones guiding or shaping the kid. That's really cool. So you taught kids in one sport, right? What was it, freshman?
Freshman in high school baseball, and then middle school hockey.
Super rad.
And then I was going to go back to the Gretzky-Einstein article, where it says, we coaches are entrusted with the development of ambitious youngsters with lofty dreams, but we limit those dreams by removing the element of trial and error. How can another young Gretzky develop unbridled creativity in our highly structured youth programs? There are too many trophies, too much hype from parents, too much pressure to avoid mistakes. And
Damn.
moving on with that, the only way to get better is through trial and error, forgetting about winning trophies and letting kids play. Again, we need to help them through creativity, not complexities.
I think that's interesting. I want to hear your perspective on that more, and I want to lean into what you just said. That's a really big topic. Everything that you talk about, CJ, I really want to say, number one, I appreciate you being on the show. Number two, I appreciate how you listen, because obviously, based on what you're saying, you've listened to the concepts that we talk about, and they're all principles over personalities, folks. It's not about me, it's about the concept and the principle. And when he says things, it's not about us, it's about we. It's about the principle versus personalities. So what he just said is so profound. It is so big. Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, to me, I want to hear more about what you have to say about it, because I talk about it every day. But yeah, I think that we ultimately have a duty and an obligation to bring our youth guidance and direction and be open to failure. And like, we give people trophies for constellation prizes. Like, I think it's okay to fail. And I think we should tell kids that. Like, it's okay to fucking lose. But do you like it? And do you enjoy it? Like, sit in it and feel it. Like, do you like losing or do you like winning? Do you like being bad? Do you like being good at something? That's why it's crucial to be comfortable and aware and gain perspective to all these things, because man, our society, CJ, you just hit it on the fucking head with that, man. That's so big. We create this fucking cookie cutter system that these kids feel like they have to be fit in and fit into and be a part of. And then when they have a little asterisk next to their name, or I have an asterisk, I have plenty of them, people start to feel uncomfortable and judged and less than and not perfect. That's why I talk so much about ambiguities and being open to ambiguities, because that's openness to replacing ego with being okay and comfortable with inexactness and imperfections and different perspectives. I think what that topic is super rad, and I really appreciate you sharing that. And I want to hear what you have to say based on your perspective on that topic.
Well, going back to it all being about trial and error, my theory growing up was if I lost the puck, it was my job to go get it back, you know? If I tried pulling too many moves, I was also a foot taller than everybody and had longer legs than everybody, but so it wasn't that hard. Yeah, and then I'll move on to the two main pitfalls I see when it comes to ego and training. The first one being spending too much time on the things you're good at. The problem is that working only on your strengths leaves great big holes on competition day. And then the second pitfall is worrying about winning and looking good. So the lessons we learn from those two is lesson one, don't neglect or pay lip service to your weaknesses. Don't get caught up in the feel-good, ego-stroking pursuit of always working on your strength. Getting your ass kicked in training is a fight and something to seek. That's a big one. And then lesson two, stop worrying about what other people think at training and push yourself. We don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training.
Wow. CJ, man, this is some great shit, man. So I want to lean into that. And vulnerability. So if you're running a business or a team, you have to always be looking at your biggest asset is your biggest fault. So listen, and this is really interesting. For me, my biggest fault is my biggest asset. So when I talk about this, I'm going to lean into what he just said. It's really big. My biggest failure has become my biggest strength. My most difficult experiences have built the most value in me. So like when my mom died, it built me up. It was difficult. When my company succeeded, but then it failed at the end of the day, it built me up. And then when I have a team of people, they're my most valuable asset. They help me, they build me up. We pursue our goal together, but they're also my biggest vulnerability. So if I have a big team of people, there's personalities and there's faults and it's all of us. We're imperfect. We have shortcomings. So they're my biggest vulnerability, but they're also my biggest tool and my biggest asset. So when I think about that, it makes so much sense to me. My addiction background, my addiction personality, my addictive personality is my biggest asset if I use it in a constructive fashion. If I'm using my fault in a creative, constructive fashion. What am I doing with the tools? What am I doing with my tools? What are you doing with your tools? What are you doing with your assets? What are you doing with your shortcomings, defects, and inefficiencies to maximize your strengths? Like leaning into our failures is big. It's where you gain value. It's where you gain experience. You gain insight. You gain perspective. And this is everything that we talk about in CJ that is really cool, that is really rad point, and I think that is profound, and I think that's really big topic here is leaning into that and the awareness that our vulnerabilities and our defects and our shortcomings are what we need to put most of our attention on. And another thing I want to lean into while I rant on this is that when I meet someone, I've been trying to do this more lately because I read Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. And when I say read, I mean I read the keynotes, folks. I don't spend all my time because I'm so busy reading the book. I take the keynotes and it summarizes the whole book. And in his book, Ryan Holiday says ego is the enemy. He says if you can meet someone and identify, this correlates with the Dalai Lama's Art of Happiness as well, ability to connect to others and empathize. Shout out to Isaiah, we just talked about this. When I first meet someone, I've experienced this firsthand when I've traveled the world and lived in 9 states in a few different countries, Australia and China, in a few places. I opened up authentically when I meet someone. I'll talk about my addiction, I'll talk about my brain surgery, I'll talk about my homelessness, I'll talk about my mom dying, I'll talk about all these things. And then it opens me up to empathetic connection to other human beings. And then in the snap of a finger, I no longer feel like I'm in solitude. I can go anywhere in the world now based on my experiences, and I can go there and I can talk to a stranger and be authentic, vulnerable, and real and empathize with them. And I feel like I have a friend and I feel like I'm connecting intimately with someone. So that is powerful, big shit that you're touching on. And I think it's really big stuff. And I really appreciate your perspective. And to me, that is something I could lean into. But my biggest faults, failures, and defects are the things that I now use today to bring things forward that are valuable. Everything that I'm one of the most flawed people. I've made some of the most mistakes of someone you'll ever meet. But at the same time, on the other side of that coin, I've done a lot of stuff a lot of people have never done. So it's like sculpting statues. It's like traveling the world. It's like living in 9 different states, Hawaii, going to China and Australia. And I've done it from extreme minimum circumstances. My mom was on single mom on welfare, and I was addicted to drugs at a young age. So if I can, you can. And if I'm flawed, we all know that we all are flawed. So now I'm leaning into my flaws and maximizing how I can build myself up with other people that build me up where I'm weak. That is so big. So don't you think, CJ, sorry about the rant, but don't you think that people around us then build us up and on where we're weak?
Yeah.
Like Michael Jordan, or don't you think guys like look at LeBron, for example, or people that are great athletes. That's what they have. But they also build people up.
Yep. And I think you found a very healthy addiction with this podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
You build people up. You're trying to help everybody, and you're helping yourself at the same time. You're just, I've been keeping up, and everything you're saying is coming in a full circle, and leaving yourself vulnerable, but you're confident enough to blow past it. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I get a little nervous talking on things like this and whatnot. I haven't done it in a long time, but it's like,
it's your first time, dude. If you came in and keep doing what we're doing, you're gonna be so much more comfortable. I appreciate it. There's so many people, CJ, that will not come on the show, and I really respect you for that. That's why I always say that if you've seen me when I have guests, because I ask so many people, you guys. I ask almost everyone that I have a conversation with to come on the show, and then people don't want to come on. It's like, to me, it's like, how can you be someone that's going to comment from the fucking comments section on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, and then you're going to come and then you talk all the big talk, but then when it comes time to turn on the fucking camera and put shit out there that you can do and change shit in the world, you're going to say no, and you're going to tuck your tail between your legs. I understand that it's fear and insecurities, and I am compassionate, and I understand that. But at the same time, I don't. It's binary. It's like, I don't understand it all, but I understand. Like, if you're going to talk about stuff and be about it, be about it. If you're not, you're not, then don't talk about it. Take action and do shit. Otherwise, don't talk about it. So I think that's really cool that I appreciate that, CJ.
It is a little at first it was like, when you're live, it was kind of nerve-wracking to go in there because you're so open, and because you can see who's watching,
Well, that's one of
and
the key,
like,
one of the key characteristics of what that thing you talked about, right? Consumer ethics, what is it, standards?
The ethical standards?
Yeah, what is that called?
Personal ethics standard.
Yeah, read those. What are the key characteristics of that?
So the personal ethics standard consists of the values and principles a person uses in making judgments and decisions about what is good, right, and virtuous to communicate. Way of becoming more mindful of how you practice ethical communication. The first one is honesty is the best policy.
Right there, baby. That's big. You just touched on it.
Second one is truthfulness. I believe in the value of truth. The next is what you're saying, just. And then freedom, is it speaking for freedoms of everybody? And then the last most important thing is integrity. And those are some things I learned in an ethics class in college. And once you just memorize those 5 words, it's like before you speak, you can think about, is what I'm about to say, is it truthful? Is it honest? Is it just? Is it
Totally.
integrity behind it? And then you can kind of guide yourself to know. I even told Josh earlier, it's like it almost makes you turn into like that movie Liar Liar, where you can only tell the truth. It's like, because if you're gonna be speaking the truth all the time, in the past, is when you're growing up, you purposely tell people lies so you don't scare them, family and whatnot. But it's like, I've noticed after I learned these, I'm just open to everybody, and
It's powerful.
I just don't really lie, but
I just want to lean into that, CJ. I think that's really big, and I think that it shows that you have a lot of value. I think, and if you did start a podcast, I think you could bring a lot of value forward, because I think a lot of people they don't understand the listening of communication. And you obviously, with your background with sports and education, with getting your degree in communication, have an understanding about communication and understand the value of it and the importance of it. So I really appreciate and value someone that understands that. And I think what you just touched on with that is like some of the stuff I've never heard of before. So as I say always, it's not about being right and wrong. It's about your perspective. He's now sharing his perspective. You see the value that comes from this. I can now audit and think about my beliefs and what I believe in, my perspective and my view on things in life. And if I'm going to be the one that's built up the most and I have the most well-rounded team, that means I'm going to be able to look at all these different amazing people's value and perspective and improve my perspective. It is the number one sign of intelligence, is taking value from others and deducting value from other people. A lot of times when you're younger, you struggle to do that. You have to learn the hard way. You have to hit your head against the wall. I did, and you have to fall down and scrape your knee, or cut your knee, or bruise your arm. But when you get older, you start to realize that I can take value from CJ. I can take value from Solomon. I can take value from Nate Peltier. I can take value from Bob Monahan. I can take value from Isaiah. I can take value from Derek Smith. I can take value from Gary Vaynerchuk. That doesn't make me less of a human being. That actually makes me more humble and ego-free and open and aware and have more perspective. And I think that's really cool, because I never heard about a lot of this stuff. I never heard about personal ethics standard. And on the early episode, I talked about corporate social responsibility and business social responsibility. And I think a lot of this could connect to that. And the fact that social media kind of shines a light on personal ethics standard, and the fact that social media makes people, it forces people to have, that are trying to front or fake, and it kind of, it shows if people are faking or not.
There's value in different truths. Everybody has different truths, and there's value in everybody's perspective, and
100%.
And like you're saying, you've been around the world and seen a lot more than a lot of people, and it's like you have all different values and truths, and you've seen different freedoms, and
that's pushed me to be open to that. Exactly. I think I appreciate that, CJ, and that is true. That's a part of the reason that's pushed me to be open and see this the way I do, is because of that traveling. So it's a big part of it and everything. And I think there's a lot of value that you have to bring forward. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think that we should lean into it. And it's really fun, and it's really cool that you're willing to be on the show. And I would love to do more shows with you, because there's so much stuff here that you can continue to touch on, and we could keep leaning into. Like, you touched on so many amazing points, and you touched on so many key points that, like, honestly, you could spend, to me, this is the definition of leadership. We could spend our life contemplating these ideas and contemplating social, human rights, laws, legislation, perspectives, and that's, to me, that is what we need to do. We need to bring us all together and say, how are we going to change shit? How are we going to improve shit? If we look at Homo sapiens, shout out to the book, A Brief History of Mankind, Homo Sapiens by Yuval Harari, it's about how we can come together as a team. And I think CJ touches on it. And I think we all simply have to realize we're part of the same team. We are all part of the same team. We're all part of the same tribe. Let's come together. Let's overcome the complexities and the barriers and the borders and the egos and the religions and the human rights and the societal norms and the governments and the businesses. Because at the end of the day, it's not about being right and wrong. It's about how we can sustain as a species. So I think CJ touched on a lot of great points, and I think you guys are going to probably be hearing a lot more from CJ moving forward, and I look forward to it. Don't you, CJ?
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Well, remember, folks, it's not right, it's not wrong. At Women Media, it is simply our perspective. Cool, man. 31 minutes.
Good stuff.
It was good stuff, brother. That's a lot of value there.